Hi guys, Larissa with BeCozi.net is here. So today I will show you how to make this beautiful blanket with two colors. I posted a picture of similar blanket on Giant Knitting Club, BeCozi Giant Knitting Club on Facebook, which you are welcome to join. It's a club for fellow knitters who like knitting with their hands, arms, and giant needles. And it's all about giant knitting, chunky knitting, bulky knitting. So I posted the old picture of two-colored blanket similar to this one, and I was asked to show how to make it. So for this blanket 30 by 50, I used a super chunky vegan yarn, BeCozi super chunky vegan yarn, and bulky acrylic yarn in mocha or light brown color. The vegan yarn is Ivory, and I also added some fringes to make it a little bit more beautiful. And this requires about 3 pounds of super chunky vegan yarn and about 60 yards of bulky yarn. So you can make such blanket by supplies at BeCozi.net, and let's do it. Okay guys, so we will be using 3 pounds of this beautiful ivory color vegan yarn. You can also use super chunky merino wool instead of it, because they look very similar. As you can see, they're the same, about 2.5 inches thick, and the vegan yarn is much lighter though, because merino wool is very heavy. Also we will be using 60 yards of this mocha color bulky acrylic yarn. We will have this acrylic yarn in store probably in a couple months in stock, but you can buy something similar at a craft store, maybe not as bulky, but you can use any bulky yarn that you can find. So what we will be doing, we will be using them together. So I put them in a way that they would be together, they go together. And now we will be starting knitting the same way as we usually do. So we're making a loop, insert your hand inside the loop, grab working yarn and pull it out. This is your first stitch, and you can pull the yarn up and down and make it the loop or the first stitch smaller or bigger. We'll be keeping it about 2.5 inches each, or the height of your finger. So now we are making a chain of 12 stitches for the blanket 30 by 50. It's a lapse row. Insert your hand inside this first stitch, grab working yarn, pull it out. This is your second stitch. Now you can use the left hand or right hand, it doesn't matter. I will be using my right hand, holding the first stitch with the left hand, inserting two fingers of your right hand inside, grab working yarn, pull it out. You have 3 stitches. And the same way you can make a chain of 12 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And try to keep them about the same size. It's about 3 inches every stitch for this project, because this yarn is pretty thick, so the stitches will be pretty big, about 3.5 inches. So let's see, we have how you calculating this holes, show you how many stitches you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 2 more, because for a size 30 by 50, for the width of 30, you will need 12 stitches. So here is our chain, and you can see already that the thinner yarn is beautifully incorporated in this super chunky vegan yarn. So now what we're doing next, we start knitting our first row. We are turning the chain on another side, and we're starting with the first stitch that you have. So the first stitch you're leaving, and you start knitting or pulling out stitches using these knots in the middle of every stitch. You can see this knot if you look at the stitch as a chain. So this is the chain, in the middle there is a knot. This is the chain, knot in the middle, chain, knot in the middle. So we will need 12 knots, including this first stitch. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. This is the last knot on this chain. So let's pull out stitches of the first row. So this is our first knot. Insert 2 of your fingers, grab working yarn, pull it out. So this is your first stitch. Next stitch, this is the bump or knot. Lift it, insert your hand, grab working yarn, pull it out. Next stitch, the same, and keep pulling out stitches this way until you have all 12 stitches of the first row done. And you can see how beautiful the second yarn is actually shown when it's knitted together with beautiful ivory color. I think it's beautiful combination, ivory and this mocha, and it should look really beautiful on the blanket. So this is our first row, you can see. So now why I'm using those knots in the middle? Because if you are using if you're making the first row this way, this will be your bottom. This will be beautiful chain on the bottom, and it will look really beautiful on the blanket. If you're using bottom or the top of the stitch, it will not look as beautiful. So now when we're knitting from left to the right, as we're doing in hand knitting, we are taking our working yarn and laying it in the direction where we will be knitting. So now we're knitting from left to right, so our working yarn goes to the right. So this is our first stitch of the second row. Insert your hand, grab working yarn, pull it out. This is our first stitch. Second stitch the same way, the working yarn on the back, insert your hand inside the stitch, grab working yarn, pull it out. Keep knitting your second row this way, and you are pulling these 2 working yarns together, the ivory and the mocha one, and they will be a little bit twisting between each other, but it actually will give a beautiful combination when the blanket will be done. So here is our second row, and the last stitch on the row. So we have 2 rows ready. It looks very beautiful, and now we will be making the third row. If you were watching my videos before, you know that the third row, starting third row, I always keep the first stitch, and it's not a requirement, it's just the way I'm doing it, because if you skip the first stitch at the beginning of every row here, and then when you're going from this direction, so every stitch on every row, then you will have the same chain on the side. It is not required. You can make this stitch knitted like that. This is absolutely fine. The only thing why, the only reason I'm not doing it, because it will not be creating this chain on the side. But if it's easier for you, you can go ahead and do it this way. It's up to you. Also, if you're skipping the first stitch, you will be using less yarn because you're not knitting the stitch, you're skipping it at the first one, and it will save a little bit of yarn. So we are on our third row. We're doing hand knitting the same way. Insert in your hand, grab working yarn and pull it out. Insert your hand inside the stitch, grab working yarn and pull it out. This is how you do it. I really like combining colors, and it's different. There are different ways to do it. You can combine two colors like that, what we're doing now, or you can make a blanket using couple colors and in 3 parts, 4 parts, and some parts will be one color and some parts will be another. It just really brings some additional beauty to the knitting project. So we're here. This is row number 4, and again, this is our first stitch. We are just leaving it here. You don't need to do anything. It's very simple. Just go to the next stitch. Insert your hand, grab working yarn and pull it out. You just left the stitch here. You will use it when you're knitting this direction. It will be knitted as the last one. As the first one, it's skipped. Next stitch, grab working yarn, pull it out. So now we will be doing the same pattern. It's a simple pattern, stockinette in regular knitting. In hand knitting, it's probably half stockinette because we are not turning the knitting project on another side. But we will be doing this hand knitting simple pattern. Look how beautiful our blanket looks already. And we will be knitting for 20 rows, guys, and it depends. Again, I'm giving you approximate number of rows. I will be making about 20. As you can see, I am knitting pretty loose. My stitches are pretty loose, and I'm usually measuring them by this way. I'm inserting my hand, grab working yarn, pull it out, and this is how I'm measuring the stitch. This is the height of my stitch from the top of my big finger all the way to the bone. This is the size of the stitch. This way you don't need any measuring tape. You just know that you pull the stitch and the stitch is the size of your finger. If you're knitting tighter, which is absolutely fine, some people like tighter knitting, then you might have more rows. It could be probably 22. But in any case, for this blanket, if it's a super chunky merino wool, you will need 3 pounds merino wool and 60 yards of this bulky yarn. And if it's vegan yarn, you will need a little bit more. It probably will be about between 2 and 2.5 pounds, depending how big your stitches are or how loose you are knitting. Anyway, when I'm done with my 20 rows, I will come back and I will show you how to cast off this beautiful 2-colored blanket. Okay guys, so we have 20 rows knitted, so now we will be casting off. And for casting off, you take 2 stitches of the row that you're starting together on your hand. Then working yarn goes through these 2 stitches and you're pulling 1 stitch. You're inserting your hand inside the stitch, working yarn on the back, and add another stitch to your hand. You have 2. Pull working yarn through, you have 2 stitches that became 1. And the same way to the next stitch. You have 1 stitch on your hand, add another one, pull working yarn through, and you have 1 stitch. It's on your hand, and you are adding another stitch, and pull in working yarn through. Keep doing this way until you are done with knitting all the stitches. 2 stitches, working yarn through, and it's 1. Add another stitch, pull working yarn through, and it will be 1 again. And we have just couple more stitches to cast off this way. And when you cast off all the stitches, you have just 1 stitch left, and you will have your working yarn ended. I will not be cutting it because I will be using this yarn yet. So what you're doing, you're taking this tail of working yarn, inserting it inside the last stitch, and pull it out. So this is your end. This is the end of working yarn, and you are weaving it in on the back of your knitting project. So between the stitches, you can use these knots of the last row. This way it will not be really noticeable. So just pull it on the back like that. If you want an advanced way, you can use the felting needle and felting mat and felt the end together. In this way it will be really connected well. Otherwise, here is our blanket. It's really nice and beautiful. So now I will show you how you can actually decorate this blanket. You can make it even a little bit more beautiful or cuter. And what you can do, you can take, if you have some leftover, so take a leftover of the white yarn, or actually another color yarn would work too. It will be not as fluffy though. And then cut a piece, let's say about 15 or 20 inches, depending how long you want your tassels be. So let's say 20 inches like that. So then simply make a knot with this yarn on the end, go inside the stitch, and then make a knot, and this will be your fringe like that. And you can make it nice and even on the end like that with the scissors, and this, and then you can connect it together. Oops, sorry. So this one, you can fluff it out together like that, and this will bring some additional chic to your blanket. So this is another 20 inches, and you can make them as often as you want. So then you go on the other end, and the middle of this fringe, make a knot, and this is your knot. Now you can make it even on the end. This is your other fringe, and you can see here we have 2 fringes now, and we will make 2 more fringes, 20 inches strips. And now this 2 goes in the middle between these ends, so just the same distance like that. You can see, you can make measurements to be really precise, or you can just attach them and approximately the same distance from each other. So it's very simple way, but the blanket will have some very unique look with this beautiful fringes, if you like fringes, of course. So here is our blanket. It has some fringes on the side. See, So it's blanket 30 by 50, and I was using a super chunky vegan yarn in Ivory, BeCozi super chunky vegan yarn, and I was also using this bulky acrylic yarn that you can either try to find in craft store, or it will be available in our store later, probably in about a month or so. So anyway, you can find supplies for your giant knitting at BeCozi.net. Please comment underneath of this video, and stay warm and be cozy.